Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi, and welcome to another episode of Justice for All Now on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim focused TV channel. You can watch us on satellite Galaxy 19, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, as well as social media. Today we'll be interviewing presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein. Jill Stein is a physician and an environmental health advocate and an organizer. As the Green Party's presidential candidate in 2016 and 2012, she has long been fighting for a foreign policy based on diplomacy, international law, and human rights. She's now running as a Green Party candidate for president and is on track to put an impassioned anti-war, anti-genocide choice on the ballot for voters across the 50 states. Welcome, Dr. Stein.
Great to be with you, Hannah.
Okay, let's get started. Can you reflect back on your experiences as the Green Party's candidate for president of the United States? You've done the run twice before. What have been some of the highlights and some of the challenges?
The highlights for me, as a mother and a medical doctor, is seeing that we are a human community. When you run for national office, you do a flyover, you do a very big flyover, and you have a chance to talk to a lot of people. And for me, it is so uplifting to get outside of the box. You know, I describe myself as a mother on fire and a medical doctor who moved from clinical medicine to political medicine to address the mother of all illnesses, our sick political system. And for me, it is so gratifying to participate in something outside of that sick political system, something that I feel really brings the best of our humanity and the best of our communities to bear on our world today and our future. So I have to say, I just find the process extremely uplifting. And that amounts to conversations. It amounts to really a world of discovery with new friends, new communities, and new networks. And in this race in particular, it's been so wonderful to really connect with the Muslim American community, to share our very deeply held values and concerns and our sense of emergency. And I feel so grateful for to be in communication and in relationship. To me, that is like the real driving force here. It is the real satisfying part of running for office. And to me, it is really the hope for the future and how we can continue to build on the enormous possibilities of this moment. And in terms of the challenges to me are how the system tries to lock out challengers, a system which is bought and paid for by the military industrial complex, by Wall Street, by the forces of power and greed that have taken us so desperately in the wrong direction. And, they throw all sorts of roadblocks in your way. At this point, I'm kind of used to that. And that doesn't bother me. That feels to me it's kind of a given. Their smear campaigns or their fear campaigns that you have to vote for the lesser evil and you don't dare vote for your values and the future that we must demand. We cannot accept, the normalization of genocide, basically, and of the killing, widespread killing of innocent civilians and children, especially. So, to me, the roadblocks are what you would expect the empire to throw up when it sees that its days are numbered and that there is really a rising force now on behalf of people, planet, and peace. And to me, it's such an honor to be a part of this movement that the challenges for me, they kind of fade to the background.
People, planet, and peace. That's a really great tagline. But how do you see the role of third parties in American political landscape evolving from sort of being sidelined, and especially in light of the growing political polarization?
I think third parties are absolutely critical. And I want to quote Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist, who said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will." Right now, we have two parties that are basically bought and paid for by the war industry, the insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry, the real estate developers, you name it. Those who are succeeding right now, who are really at the top of the heap, are calling the shots and defining the rules. And so you have to get outside of that system and challenge it. It's been it's been a fight. I entered the fight. I was tricked into entering the fight, actually, as a medical doctor and an advocate that just saw us backsliding over and over, year by year. We were not making progress. We were losing ground, whether you're talking about poverty or pollution or war. We were not moving forward here on a basic humanitarian agenda. And I was tricked into running for office by the Green Party that said, well, why don't you continue those battles, but do it in an election where you have an opportunity to talk to all kinds of people. And I said, wow, that sounds great. Nothing else is working. Might as well try, out of desperation, politics. And I entered that fray out of desperation, but I came out of it, that first race, with incredible inspiration to see how much, when you get outside of the very constrained world of corporate politics, that in fact, people are really hurting for a different way forward and are hurting to really bring our higher values to this and to be our better selves. So I see us having made incredible progress since those early days, and that was like the year 2002. So I've been in this for a while, and I've really seen the view of third parties change to where now it's the majority of Americans who consider themselves outside of the two major parties, and 63%, an all-time high in a poll this year by Reuters. I'm sorry, this was a poll by Gallup, I believe, that does this poll every year. It's now at an all-time high for those who are saying that the two parties have failed us and we need more choices outside of that two-party system. And that's basically, what I've been running on each time. And we have been able to really reset the agenda and the issues that we have introduced, from BDS and Palestinian human rights, which we brought to the national dialogue in 2012, to a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy, rather than on brute military force, which is kind of the way the Democrats and Republicans do it, both of them, a foreign policy basically based on empire, to healthcare as a human right. I mean, all of these things have now they were introduced by us starting in the year 2000 by Ralph Nader, who introduced healthcare as a human right in the single-payer system. And those have now been adopted by progressives across the board, though they don't actually do it. And when they have the power to do it, they don't, which just affirms that they are serving, their donors, basically, their donor base. In the Green Party, we are a grassroots, people-powered party, and we do not accept large donations. That is, we do not use the loopholes for corporations and billionaires and bankers to basically call the shots by making very large donations. The Democrats and Republicans use loopholes whereby a single donor can contribute $600,000 in a single check. We don't do that. We play by the rules, so-called, small donor campaign, which is up to $3,300. That's not small, but compared to what the Democrats and Republicans do, that is small. They use super PACs, they use corporate PACs and so on, by which corporations basically pile on. We disavow all of that. We disapprove of it. We don't do it so that we can remain, a party that is of, by, and for the people. And we do not have these these kind of built-in biases, because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So we are very meticulous about not taking large contributions, so that it continues to be, like a one person, one vote type of party. We are a party of the people.
Tell us more about the Green Party. Now, are there Green Party candidates who are serving in office right now?
Yes, we have some 240, I believe. And over the course of the last 15 years that we've been a party, we've had about 1,000 people, largely in lower office. We've had a few state legislative representatives, but more at the at the municipal level. So city councilors and boards of select men and women, mayors, development planning boards, et cetera, school committees. So that's largely where our actual office experience has. But we are required to run for higher office in order to have access to the ballot. And in fact, we have found that by running for higher office, we actually change the agenda. And it's really important, in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without the demand. The demand has to be there. And if one ever wants to be have a major influence, you have to build. So, we've run at all levels for office and have found that our ideas, because we are a people-powered party, that we've made a really, major contribution to political dialogue and advancing the agenda of justice across the board.
So, Jill, if you were president right now, what would you have done differently than President Biden, especially when it comes to this genocide?
Well, let's start where we are right now. I would pick up the phone and put an end to this genocide with a phone call, which can be done, which Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s, when he told Israel to back off, get out of Lebanon, stop, pursuing the PLO, and assaulting people and refugees all over the place in Lebanon. And so Israel pulled back. But Joe Biden has even more authority now, I think, because 80% of the weapons being used to slaughter and massacre the people of Palestine, and not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, which is all just unbelievably shameful and horrifying. That would stop in the blink of an eye. It's also illegal right now. So not only could the president make a phone call and call it all off, call Netanyahu's troops off, we could also stop the flow of weapons. And Israel, it is illegal. It is against U.S. law now to be sending weapons to any country that is interfering with humanitarian aid. And that is such an understatement for what Israel is doing. So there's absolutely no basis now for this continuing transfer of weapons. And while Joe Biden gives lip service to, his humanitarian concerns, which are really just so distressing to hear, because the hypocrisy is just over the top, as if he's helpless, as if Bibi Netanyahu is his boss. It is the other way around. The U.S. provides the diplomatic cover, we provide the financing, and we provide the weapons, and they should all be shut down. So on day one, we do that. And I think we don't even want to wait for day one, that the more powerful a force we are, as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. That's why we're encouraging people to get behind our campaign, to go beyond abandoning Biden, to actually support the alternative to Biden, the challenge to Biden, because it is that challenge that moves the needle now, which is what we have to do, because we are looking at, as you well know, 2 million people. As a doctor, I know that we are on a death watch now for 2 million people. We have been for quite some time. And every hour counts now, with the unbelievable conditions that are being inflicted on the people of Gaza. And aside from the starvation and not having water, being in these unbelievably crowded conditions without sanitation, it's just a setup for a massive epidemic, cholera or whatever, to break out on top of people who are already just so weakened and disabled by the starvation that we don't have a moment to lose. And this is an emergency of the highest order.
When I look at this race, and even when, for example, you walk into Annapolis, to our state capital here in Maryland, and you see that it's already that since the beginning it was set up for the Democrats and the Republicans. They're like two main halls, and that's where they go in and have their meetings. Why was it set up this way? Whereas you look at other democracies around the world, and several democracies have very viable other parties, and they make coalitions and they run business that way. Can you give us reflect a little bit on the history of this?
Yes. And I can tell you why other countries don't use this system. Other countries, democracies use multi-party system. And because the US was kind of first, and also because it was the era of slavery, it was the era of colonialism. There were so many bad things that unfortunately took root with the founding of this country and the genocide, really, on which it was founded. There were many regrettable things that were sort of built into US infrastructure at that time. And when modern democracies were founded, they were using best practices, and there was much better consideration given, and there was a greater history of democracy at that point. And it was known at that point that multi-partisan democracies and parliamentary system, and a system that would allow proportional representation, sort of a multi-party voting system, those were kind of built in based on best practices. And there's a movement here that is very much part of the green agenda. And we, again, have been really pushing the envelope on that as long as we've been kind of part of the national dialogue. We have been pushing for those kinds of reforms, for proportional representation, which allows a multi-party system, for ranked choice voting, which gets rid of this fear-mongering about third parties, that a third party is going to throw the election, they're going to steal somebody's vote. It just lends itself to this ridiculous voter shaming and candidate blaming. It's ridiculous. So these are the ways it can be solved, and other countries are doing that. There are just so many reasons for us to move forward with that agenda. This is not rocket science. This is fixable. And I have to say, taking money out of politics is a part of this too. The obscene amounts of money that are being spent on elections. When I first ran in 2012, it was about $7 billion that was spent on the US election that year. When I ran for the second time, 4 years later, it had doubled. It's just unbelievable. And now, through super PACs and dark money, unlimited, even $1 billion can be thrown in by a single donor without disclosing who the donor is, and so on. There are just, it's a very corrupt and corrupting system right now. And it's, in the words of Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who was back in the 20th century, one of his famous sayings was, "We have a choice in this country between vast concentrations of wealth or a democracy." We've gone the vast concentrations of wealth, and that has really enabled corruption of the system across the board. So this can be fixed. And the good news is that the American people want to fix this, are very supportive of getting the big money out, getting the people back in to our political system, also closing the revolving door so that people are not moving from corporations either into elected office or our regulatory agencies, where the foxes too often are running the chicken coop, and there are all kinds of examples of that. So these are fixable problems. The American people is behind that. We badly need to push ahead with leadership that will act on what the people want and the people need.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back, continuing our conversation with Dr. Jill Stein. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Jill Stein, the presidential candidate from the Green Party. Dr. Stein, I'm imagining a Jill Stein presidency. How would you deal with the Congress as it is right now? We've seen several genocidal statements come out from some of our Congress people. We've seen them side with ethnic cleansing, and they keep passing bills to send even more money and weapons overseas.
Well, this is illegal to do this. And I believe we have a very firm basis in law for shutting it down. The president also plays a key role in authorizing the transfer of weapons. So even after Congress has appropriated money, the president has the power to not authorize transfers as well. So I think there are many ways in which the president can intervene in the process. But beyond that, the president has the bully pulpit, and the American people don't need persuading. As many as 68% have called for, that was in a Reuters poll, I think in November, even at that time. And the numbers just keep going up in terms of the numbers of people who recognize that this is a genocide and it's absolutely unacceptable. So, I think the problem is when we have, well, one of the problems is that there's a lot of money behind this between AIPAC and the weapons industry. There needs to be very unapologetic voices of resistance. We're not getting that from our leadership in Congress, neither party, not from the White House, and not from the cabinet and the Secretary of State. So simply by having the bully pulpit of the White House, we completely turn the tables on this. And again, we empower the forces of reason and humanity that are already winning the day. So I am not worried. I think our fight is to get there, and they will do everything they can to maintain this genocide, to maintain the empire of which this genocide is a symbol, of which it is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of investment in staying the course here. And it's not only a matter of stopping the slaughter at the moment, it's also reversing occupation and apartheid. So we're here for a long haul, but I do believe that the people are with us. And while there may be certain misleaders, criminal misleaders, who will continue to advocate for the weapons industry and for war and genocide and xenophobia and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, there will be really unfortunate voices out there, but I do believe they are seriously the minority here. And the problem is that the leadership is in the wrong hands right now. And by moving into positions of power, by taking the power that rightly belongs to us as a humanitarian force, we completely change the dynamics here. So because the president, has so much authority over foreign policy, I don't think foreign policy is going to actually be our biggest challenge, because the president has a lot of power to basically stop wars and to stop weapons transfers. But in the area of public opinion, there's a lot that we can do to ensure that we are building a greater sense of humanity, that we are supporting international law and human rights. We can continue to promote this even while our Congress is on the wrong track.
So let's look inward. Let's look at the country itself. You have been a vocal advocate for a single-payer healthcare system. Given the current healthcare debates, how do you see a path forward for implementing the system in the United States?
Two things. One is congressional hearings, and the other one is town hall meetings in the districts of the different Congress people, because there's overwhelming public demand for healthcare as a human right, and for a system in which we are not squandering 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars in our current system, which is, it's like a $4.5 trillion annual expenditure. This is a big expense, and 1 out of every $3 in that 4+ trillion expense is spent on bureaucracy, on paper pushing and red tape, doesn't transfer to healthcare whatsoever. By moving to a Medicare for all type system, an improved Medicare for all system that fills in some of the holes that have been knocked out of it, by moving to that comprehensive Medicare for all, everybody in, nobody out, by moving to that system, we save 1/3 of healthcare expenditures. We save enough that we can then cover everyone comprehensively, not just elders in Medicare, but everyone from the moment of conception on through, through the end of life. Everyone is fully covered for acute care, chronic care, mental health, your hearing aids, your sight, your eyeglasses, and so on. People are completely covered, and we still save $500 billion. So this is a program that sells itself. The only reason we don't have it is because we've had the servants of the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry standing in the way. But when we have a people-powered politics, we can move this along. As president, I would need the support of a grassroots movement, which we are building in order to get as far as we can in this presidential race. Along with that, we are running, congressional candidates and Senate candidates and so on, so that we come with a grassroots movement that can then move this agenda. And the low-hanging fruit in our agenda is actually Medicare for all, healthcare as a human right, because it's across the political spectrum. People are demanding it. The servants of industry are standing in the way, but when we have a strong grassroots movement, we can push through that resistance. I'm confident.
It sounds wonderful. And it sounds, these are some of the struggles of average people who don't make, hundreds and thousands of dollars. And even those who do make that and pay hefty taxes are struggling. People are struggling to put their kids through college, which is so expensive. And even though they're paying taxes, they feel like their taxes are being used in inappropriate manner, not helping. The homeless population is growing in every major city across the country. Our railways, our bridges are falling. And this is really troubling a lot of Americans, including American Muslims. So what economic policies do you believe are crucial for addressing this growing wealth gap in the United States?
Yeah, so let me just talk broad brushstroke. There are two things we need to do. We need to stop wasting money, and we also need to start spending money where it's needed. And the biggest waste of our money right now is on the endless war machine, which consumes more than half of our congressional budget, in the same way that we over-police as well. And we burden our local police departments with mental health problems and homelessness problems that are solved much more efficiently and effectively by hiring staff professionals who can provide that kind of service. We've been growing our police departments without really, dealing with the problems of our municipalities. We're neglecting those problems, and a lot of the problems are poverty, which generates crime and homelessness and lack of education and all those things. So we can spend our money far more effectively, not just on the military. And, what do we get for all our military expenditures? And we're spending as much as the next 10 countries combined. And by the way, the cost of that is $12,000 this year alone. The average cost per household for the endless war machine in the Pentagon is $12,000 per household average this year. $50,000 and more since the post 9/11 wars. And what have we gotten with that? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, and continuing terrorist threats. Our military policy has been a flagrant failure, as well as a moral catastrophe. So we need to start spending our money more wisely on true security. An overblown and reckless imperial military and foreign policy is not a good use of dollars whatsoever. It impoverishes us, and it also endangers us. So instead, we need to spend our money on our true needs, true security, beginning here at home, which means essentially an economic bill of rights is what we call for. So healthcare for everyone doesn't cost us anything. It actually saves us $500 billion. So that's another way in which we use our money more wisely and effectively. An economic bill of rights that includes the right to a job with living wages. And we integrate that in our overarching solution of the Green New Deal, an emergency Green New Deal. This is like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression. It creates a lot of jobs. It puts people to work in productive work. But in this case, it's focused especially on converting our economy to a sustainable and just economy. And job creation is folded into that, as well as clean renewable energy, sustainable agriculture. We also call for the provision of housing outside of this, extremely predatory system of housing and real estate right now, in which housing is run basically to produce the greatest profit rather than to meet people's needs. And there are examples of other countries that do this far more efficiently and effectively through a social housing, previously called public housing, which is mixed income and high quality housing for everyone. This should be available. Likewise, education, you shouldn't have to go into debt in order, lifelong debt, in fact. Student debt is lifelong debt now, in order to have the education that you need to have a fighting chance in the economy. How crazy is it that you should have to destroy yourself economically in order to acquire the skills that you need? This should be built in. When I was growing up, it was built in. It was either free or absolutely minimal cost. In the same way we have provided high school education, because that's what was required to do well in the economy back in the prior century. Well, now you need a college education. So that should be provided as a matter of course. We also need to bail out students from debt. We bailed out Wall Street when the crooks crashed the economy. We need to bail out the students who were the victims of that crash. So that's kind of the overarching economic Bill of Rights, which is really core to our agenda. And it is what is required to actually get us out of this situation where, what is it? It's like 16 or 17% of Americans are in poverty now. It's just staggering, the numbers. We can, put an end to that and, create a society and an economy that's working for all of us. This isn't rocket science. And I would add to that, the super rich and many very powerful corporations now are getting off without paying any, any taxes whatsoever. And the inheritance.
That blows my mind every time I hear that. It's just like, you didn't pay any tax. I pay more taxes than my kids pay more taxes than some of these corporations.
Exactly. They used to pay 6% following the Second World War. Now their contribution, 6%, I should say, of GDP. There was a time when corporations were contributing 6% of GDP. Now they contribute 1% of GDP. So we've given away the store to those who are most, thriving in this economy. And unfortunately, they run the show, which is what's wrong with this best democracy that money could buy. It's money that buys policy. And we have to put an end to that as the highest overarching solution, democracy, and restoring the power of everyday people, not money, to decide our policies is the overarching solution. But then within that, there are many achievable policies that are not rocket science that can get us to where we need to go.
We'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with Dr. Jill Stein. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Jill Stein, where we were talking about inflation and the wealth gap between the wealthy and the rest of America. Now, as we are looking across and at some of the issues that the Green Party has been particularly strong on, we have had this discussion before, and I'd really like to share this with the rest of our audience. There have been recently internal changes in the Green Party that it has gone through in recent years. How have these changes affected the party strategy, priorities, and overall direction? Who are some of the new people that have been involved in the party?
So a lot of youth, I guess, for one thing, young people are coming into the party. When we began to fight for free public higher education and for abolishing student debt, that was a very big issue for the party and for the broader public, and for 44 million young people who really are locked out of their future because of student debt. So we've seen a big growth in young people. We have always been actually a party of racial justice. And my running mate in 2012 was a Jamu Baraka, who's widely known and respected as a peace advocate. He now is one of the founders, I guess you would say, of the Black Alliance for Peace, which is a noted anti-war group. So we've had, I guess, a rising profile in the African American community. In fact, we've been running strong in polls early on, both with youth and in the African American community. When we adopted BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions towards Israel, that I think was an invitation to Muslim Americans who have begun moving into the party. Even starting back in 2012, I'm forever meeting people now on the campaign trail who say that they came to the party. And these are, Muslim Americans in particular, who say that they came to the party in 2012 because we were, ahead of the curve on that. So we've seen the party grow in really important ways. And now that genocide and student debt are really, the raging issues on campuses, it's really helped, draw young people into the party, which has been very exciting to see.
So what are some of the ways, and especially as we're talking about young people, and you have been in this for decades, what are some advice that you would give to young activists and politicians who want to make a difference outside of the two major political parties?
Well, right there, I would just so encourage people to stay on course, because it's so disempowering and so disheartening to be inside of the two major parties, which are being funded by, empire and oligarchy. So everything that young people are on fire about right now is really shut down by the two major parties. And I think anyone who is breaking away now is just totally on the right track. It's always been the younger generation that has pushed the envelope, and that has been the source of major social progress, whether you were looking at the abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, the environmental movement. I mean, every one of them really has been led by young people. And I so value their input and really want to support them, and want to support them in what they see as important, and really encourage people to be active within the Green Party, because we are one of the national options for organizing. It's important to organize on the issues, but if we only organize on the issues and we don't also organize for political power, we will be sidelined. As we've seen over and over in every area, including war in Gaza and Israel. We have to organize for political power. Again, as Frederick Douglass informed us, power concedes nothing without the demand. And we've got to get power to concede. And simply by organizing on the issues, we will be sidelined over and over again. So I really encourage people to go where your heart guides you, and to stand up on the issues that are really critical for you. And to trust your judgment, because young people are coming to this with fresh eyes. And so they're not seeing things the way they looked, in the 1980s or the 1990s. They're seeing them now. And I really encourage young people to fight on the issues that are critical to their future. And that includes debt, that includes jobs, that includes climate, that includes war, and that includes genocide. They're all folded together. And I would encourage people not to feel like you have to pick one issue and get married to it and only do that alone, because we live in many dimensions of life, and that to me is one of the advantages. And when I came very late to politics, I was at the tender young age of 50 before I had anything to do with any political party, because I grew up during the Vietnam War and I did not trust any political party. And it was only when I kind of discovered the Greens that I thought, oh my goodness, here's a politics of integrity. This is actually about people. And one of the great things about it was that people are working on the whole pie. You can work on one issue that has special meaning for you, but a political party is a coalition. By definition, it's a coalition of people who are working on a shared vision and a shared sense of values. So in a way, you become much more powerful if you are working in coalition. And it's a coalition that's not just for the moment, it's a coalition for the long haul. That's, because there are difficult battles that need to be fought. And knowing that we are fighting them with people who have a very deep commitment and a shared sense of values is extremely empowering and uplifting, I have to say, and just really changes your feeling about being alive, and hopelessness kind of goes out the door. And there's just a much greater sense of resolve and conviction and support, feeling supported by a broader community with a shared imperative.
No, the vision sounds amazing. It would be, it's having politicians that are more accessible, politicians that aren't divas locked up in their little castles down on Capitol Hill. The kind of politicians that you are talking about, and have, I see all these staffers who are absolutely enraged by what their bosses are doing. We read about them. We read about how they are, disillusioned by democracy, because what they hear people calling on the phone and asking them to do versus what their bosses are doing, there's such a vast difference. And I keep thinking, why aren't these young people running for office? Why aren't these young people taking over the reins and actually using their moral compass and, helping run the country? They know how to do it. They're in these offices. So, and the Green Party seems like an option that a lot of times doesn't get talked about. So I am so glad that you're here, that we are able to have this discussion, and that people will be able to hear what you are about and what your platform is about. So I really appreciate that. Any last final words before we end the show?
Yeah. So, first, a big thank you, because I feel that there's so much of a shared vision, and it's been really wonderful to be working intensively with so many colleagues in the Muslim American community. And it's just been really exciting to see how much potential power there is by way of numbers, by way of a mission, a mission of human rights and social justice. I'm unbelievably excited about this. And in this election, I want to share with people just a really quick kind of picture that I find extremely encouraging. And I have to quote Alice Walker here, who said, "The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with." And when you start putting together the 68% of Americans, or whatever poll you want to choose, but they're all doing very well now. It's definitely a majority of Americans who want an immediate ceasefire and an end to the genocide. When you start adding those numbers together with 44 million young people who are locked into student debt, together with 100 million people who are locked into medical debt, together with 50% of renters who can't afford their rent, who are seriously stressed, you start to get to a huge potential voting bloc. And these are the people who are locked out. In Michigan, we saw not only 14% abandon Biden, but there was a 50% rate of staying home and not voting at all. So voters are demanding other options right now, and they have essentially abandoned the ruling parties. So it's a really great time to be standing up and coming together, there will be 4 pro-genocide candidates on the ballot. Biden, Trump, no labels if they find a candidate, and they probably will, which is basically just a billionaire front group, and Robert F. Kennedy, who says he's a peace candidate, but he's a genocide candidate. That's not peace. And the Middle East war is not like, you can't disappear it. There's a Middle East war which is enlarging right now around Israel's genocide, and this is extremely dangerous. And the U.S. is, playing a major role in this. So there are going to be 4 candidates that share this horrible agenda that will be on the ballot, splitting that vote. And then we are the only campaign at this point, and the only campaign really, arguably, that can get on the ballot in all across the country. We are the one campaign, the one anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker, climate emergency campaign. We are a unifying force here, and there's going to be one of us on the ballot across the country. So when you have one unifying campaign, 4 that are dividing, you can see a 5-way race that can be won with as little as 21% of the vote. So it's not like we have to get to 51% of the electorate, because the electorate could be divided in such a way that might actually make that win possible. That's not to say you should hold your breath, but on the other hand, I would definitely not rule it out. And you have to your vision has to set the agenda. We can do that. We can set the agenda and aim for an America and a world that works for all of us. That is what we have to aim for. And by aiming for it, we get as far as we can in this election cycle, and then we continue to build on that, because we are a large party, and there's growing convergence among the progressive parties in this race. So we are a force to contend with, here for the long haul. And the name of the game is to tune out, to reject this propaganda of powerlessness, and to stand up and to recognize the power that we do have to demand an America and a world that actually works for all of us. This is within our reach, and hold on to your hats, because it's going to be a very exciting election. And I want to encourage people to go to jillstein2024.com and check us out, and and join the team, because with your help, we can make this happen. Together, we are unstoppable.
Thank you so much. That's jillstein2024.com. And let's get some green in the red, blue, and white. Thank you so much for joining us and watching Justice for All Now on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum and good night.